We certainly live in troubling times. Before I jump into this podcast, let me first apologize if the audio quality is a little off or if there's background noise or what have you. Having to record this one just a little differently, so please bear with me. As I watch events take place, probably much like you, I judge them by whether or not they are prophetically relevant. As we're watching these Epstein files play out and all the events surrounding that, the question for me is it prophetically relevant, or is it just more of the evil of the last days? Quite frankly, it could be either or, and we're just not going to know until it plays out. I do, however, see a way that this is prophetically relevant, and if it is, I think it points more towards a 2026 Feast of Trumpets rapture than a 2025 one. And to me, it all hinges on why America isn't there for Israel during the war of Gog and Magog. As it stands, I still think it's the rapture that explains why America isn't here for Israel during the war of Gog and Magog. However, if we are here to see the events of Gog-Magog unfold, this could very well explain why America isn't going to help Israel. Let me lay out a scenario to explain what I mean by that. Let's first back up to when Trump was running for president. When he was running, he said that he was going to expose the Epstein files, or at least he was going to release them. After that, a lot of high-profile people that he brought in for jobs in his cabinet claimed that one of the first things they were going to do is release this information to the public. We then had Pam Bondi on Fox News saying that the information was on her desk and it was going to be released the next day. Following that, a bunch of influencers went to the White House, and they received packets of information that turned out to really be nothing. When asked about that, Bondi said that she had tons of information on her desk, but they had to go through it because it was too much information and they wanted to make sure that they didn't release anything that would endanger innocent people. Then some time passed, and more questions started being asked about it. Then we had Kash Patel and Dan Bongino appearing on Fox News also, stating that Epstein did in fact commit suicide, and that they were going to release the raw video footage showing that nothing funny took place. Well, then shortly after that, the video that was released was an absolute joke. It had everybody in the entire world facepalming because it was one of the most amateur edits of video that has been released by government, and I can't remember when. And for good measure, just had a whole minute clipped out of it. It was a complete and utter farce, and everybody knew it. Then we hear the rumors that Bongino is going to resign or quit. And this was then followed by that cabinet meeting where Trump just dismissed the whole thing and then mockingly said, "Why is anybody still asking about Epstein?" He then followed up with that the next day, claiming that it was just all false information made up by the Democrats. Now, I'd say you're probably much like me and scratching your head on this one because it makes no sense at all. In fact, there are a number of different ways he could have handled it. He had a whole array of options open to him, and only one of them wouldn't have worked. If it was just information that had been polluted or made up by the Democrats, well, he could have said so. He could come out and say that the Democrats, we had this information, but the prior administration tampered with it, and now we don't know what's what, and we need to investigate, so we can't release anything just yet. I'm sure the public would have been mad about that, and the Democrats would have been yelling about that, but everybody that voted for him would probably had just gone on and said, well, okay, we'll wait and hear what you have to say. Even in a worst-case scenario, he could have come out and said, hey, look, we're sorry. This information is just too bad, and we cannot release it. I apologize, but we cannot release this information. Rest assured that we will work behind the scenes to bring justice to this. Even if he'd have done that in a worst-case scenario, everybody would have hated it. And, of course, the Democrats would have probably been trying to come up with some way to impeach him, and malcontents would be malcontents. But at the end of the day, everybody that voted for him, while upset about that, would still think, well, you know, at least we still have the first president that I could ever remember that's honest with us. And I'm sure it would have died down and things would have continued on. But rather than any variant of that, he did the one thing that would not have worked and he should not have done. And we're all left scratching our head over this because it makes no sense. Now, as I'm going through this, please understand that this is just someone trying to make sense of the senseless, and I'm just presenting a scenario, and that's all it is, so please just take it as such. Now, if we look at what's just been publicly talked about as being factual, the idea, at least on the surface, is kind of presented as these are teenage girls, 15, 16, 17, that were promised money or favors to go to this island and do these things with these older men. And in that scenario, yes, it's disgusting, and yes, it's illegal, and yes, it should be shut down, and these people should be prosecuted. But there's also not a perpetrator and a victim. There's just perpetrators of the law. A good example of what I mean by that is if we look at, like, say, a 15, 16, or 17-year-old person that commits murder, well, a lot of them get tried as adult, and we say rightfully so, because what they did, they knew full well what they did, and they should be tried for it. And depending on who's talking about it, refers to them as either children or victims. Now, outside of the mainstream media, we're hearing more information about horrific crimes committed against actual children. Now, you would have to just not want to see it or hear about it to not understand that the latter is true. Yes, you did have the teenage prostitution that was taking place there, but more than that, this was a place of no oversight. You could get away with anything you wanted to do. And in fact, the calling card of this place was that you could go and do the most perverted, despicable, horrific thing you wanted to do. In that scenario, do you think evil has a limit? Do you think things just stopped at underage prostitution? Of course not. I think every manner of evil and horrific thing that you can imagine happened there. Some of the most evil things that you can imagine being done to children, including torture and murder, happened there. Now imagine, if you will, we were to find out that the Mossad and the CIA ran this operation. Even worse than that, what if we were to find out that this was just a Mossad-run operation? Now, I don't think that the CIA is not involved somehow, but what if we were to find out that it was a Mossad-led operation? Now, that's bad enough, but I don't think that's the end of the story right there. Because if we were to stop right there, I mean, yes, that's absolutely bad enough. But it still plays into the hands of Trump in that one of his big selling points, or one of the things that he campaigned on, was dismantling the deep state. Well, this right here gives him the 2x4 to go and do it with. And as far as Israel goes, Netanyahu could easily distance himself from that and say, yes, we agree with Trump, this was awful, and we're going to find out who was behind it, and we're going to clean house just like Trump's cleaning house. Now, that doesn't make it go away, but it does keep it from changing the trajectory that we're on right now. However, what if this all starts to unravel and things start to come out, and then finally we get verification that this was indeed a mostly Mossad-run operation? And then we started getting information about U.S. politicians being blackmailed to vote certain ways on different things. And it wouldn't even have to be a whole lot of them. It could just be a couple here and there. Now, when you start talking about that, you start talking about things that would be in the ballpark or on the same level of nuking a U.S. city. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of this country would openly demand war against Israel. I mean, think about it. If any country did that to the U.S., everyone is going to say, wipe them off the map. Now, it is different because it's Israel, and you would have Christians, like myself, bringing up the point that, yes, this was horrible, but hang on a second. Mossad does not represent the entire nation, and we still have a biblical obligation to the entire nation. Agreed. This needs to be dealt with, and the people involved need to be accountable, and justice needs to be performed here, but we can't go to war with Israel. So what's the middle ground here? We're not going to go to war with Israel, but at the same time, I would be willing to bet America would sever ties with Israel. I'm not saying that's the right move, but I am saying that could be the only move left to this administration. That could also be a possible explanation as to why they look like they were all in a car together that was doing 60 miles an hour and hit a brick wall, and they just stepped out all sorts of dazed and confused. They know how bad this is, and they have no clue what to do next, so they're stumbling all over the place. So let's say we get to December, and we find that the rapture was not this Feast of Trumpets. It's 2026, and we're all still here. And all of these leaks and theories have gotten to a point of critical mass that we actually have verification that this is indeed what has happened. Well, we're certainly going to have a time period of complete political upheaval. Anti-Semitic behavior is going to sweep the country, far worse than I think anything we've seen so far. That will probably lead to the remaining Jews that are here, or the vast majority of them, fleeing to Israel, which that too is also biblical. And then let's say we get closer to summer or into summer, and we'll have some kind of official splitting of relationship with Israel. I don't know what that would look like or what form it would take, but I'm pretty sure it would be a hard severing of relationships with them. And I think in conjunction with that, at a minimum right after that, you would have Iran and that coalition devising their evil plan that Ezekiel 38 warns us about. And we will see the events of Isaiah 17, which I then think will become the hook in the jaw. And keep in mind, the deals that have already been in place up till then are going to be just increasing Israel's wealth and also their safety. That, of course, will also probably feed into the resentment of them. And I'd be willing to bet that after Israel nukes Damascus in response to Isaiah 17, there'll be a lot of back and forth. There'll be massive upheaval. Everybody will be freaking out. And then you're going to have this coalition forming. They're going to muster their soldiers, and then they're going to get their soldiers in place. And then, of course, you know what happens after that. And this would be happening during or shortly before or shortly after the Feast of Trumpets in 2026. And I say that because we know that in Ezekiel 39, the fullness of the Gentiles, which we also know as the rapture, is listed as one of the events that takes place during this. And again, I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if the Epstein files has anything to do with this. I don't know if the rapture is this year or next year. We'll definitely see as it plays out, and it's playing out right now. However, one thing we do know, events are happening faster now than they have ever happened before. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised that by the end of this year, the third temple will have been built, or at least construction would have started on it. I'm not saying that's a certainty, but I would not at all be surprised for that to happen. One of the things that is certain is that events have kicked into some kind of new turbo gear. Events are happening very fast now. Our window for serving Jesus and laying up treasure in heaven as he commanded us to do is rapidly coming to an end.
We spoke to Ari Ben-Mashani, who is a former Israeli spy. He said on the record unequivocally that Jeffrey Epstein was working for Israeli intelligence operations, the Mossad, and running a classic honey trap operation. That is, lure people inside, record their activities and learn about their peccadillos and use it to blackmail them.
A year and a half after that, I'm in a green room at Fox, and I'm not going to say who because they didn't give me permission to share it, but the short story, but I don't know who they are. It says, you know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure of that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that. That he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset. His plane and that island, the cameras, there's a big assumption out there that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him according to this source. These these assets, that's why this blackmail story makes so much sense. Which Middle Eastern countries they are, I don't know. But this person, who's a very, very good reporter, I mean, aces, right, swore Epstein was either a witting or unwitting intelligence asset, and they may have had his plane wired up, and they're the ones who have all this stuff. How do you know some of these countries aren't going to some of these power players who aren't making decisions? Because, hey, you wouldn't want this video out there, right?
And too many of my colleagues, I'm afraid, are compromised in this area for whatever reason. Somebody just whispered in their ear, said, hey, you don't want something to come out on something else. You better keep your mouth shut on this. And that's exactly what they've done. And it continues to go, whether it's the honeypot that the Russians used to use or something worse. I don't know. But it's clearly, you see that up and down the line. You see good conservatives vote for liberal policies.
So you're saying that right now, currently ongoing in our Congress, there are members of Congress who have been compromised by either special interests or the intelligence community to not give the American public information on Jeffrey Epstein?
I believe so. 100%. 100%.